are live. Look, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about argumentation. So, a lot of people think argumentation just means like disagree with somebody or to get into a fight with somebody, and that's really not, at least in the context of this class, what an argument means. Let's see. Let me get the link. All right, copy the link, post it onto there. Okay, there we go. So in the context of critical thinking, the notion of an argument is based on these things, and then we'll talk a little bit about artificial intelligence and maybe try and make an argument for or against it. Okay. So there's a famous skit which I'm not going to play for you guys because I don't want to get a copyright strike, from Monty Python, which is called the Argument Clinic. You can Google it yourself, but I did. You can view this. You can view this yourself, and copy link location, and it's rather good, and it actually addresses the issue of what it means to be an argument. A guy goes into the argument clinic and he pays some money to get an argument, and it just kind of boils down to a guy saying yes you did, no I didn't, yes you did, no I didn't, yes you did, no I didn't, and he's disappointed that the quality of argument is not very good. He's getting disagreement. He's not getting an argument. So I posted the link on Discord. You can watch it yourself at your leisure. It's quite good. So an argument is what happens when you want to. Do you have a quiz today? I don't know. Not yet, anyway. An argument is what happens when you want to convince somebody of something, right? You don't need to make an argument if they agree with you. You know what I mean? Like, if you think that pizza is the best type of food, and so do you, and I do, and so does Mary, well, we don't need to have an argument over it because we all agree that pizza is the best kind of food, and we just go on our merry way. So we use arguments when we're trying to be persuasive. Okay? If I'm going to try and argue that the pragmatic theory of truth is the best theory of truth, then I will make an argument for you. Okay? And so an argument is a collective series of statements to establish a proposition. Monty Python, quite good, actually, quite good. And for me, I just call it a claim supported by evidence. Okay? So you have a thesis, and then you support the thesis with a series of statements. Evidence, usually. Okay. So according to the Greeks, the classic form of a syllogism, or in philosophy they use this as well. You have a series of premises that are sort of your starting points, and then you have a conclusion. And whether or not there's statements that connect the premises to the conclusion depends on who you talk to. A lot of times in philosophy, they'll just have a list of like 20 different premises and then conclusion. Murder is bad. And so it depends who you talk to. But I like to think of an argument as you start with these premises, like we can agree that this, and this are true, and then if we can agree that this, and this are true, which are our premises, which oftentimes will seem very straightforward, like you shouldn't murder a baby, or it's a bad idea to jump off a building or something like that. If you can agree the starting point, these premises, is true, then you can reason your way to the conclusion, the point that you're trying to make. The pragmatic theory of truth is the best theory of truth, or the correct theory of truth. Yep. So, this is a really important concept here, and it will be on your midterms and finals and things like that. And you're asking if there's a quiz. Probably have to do a quiz on this. So there's three possibilities for how good an argument is. The first is it's fallacious, right? Like if the logic doesn't work, then we just discard the argument and move on with our life, right? So if I start with the premise, if it is raining, I will bring my umbrella, and it is not raining today, and from that I conclude that I will not bring my umbrella. That is denying the antecedent fallacy, and people will just be like, nope, you made a mistake in your reasoning. Goodbye. But most arguments, usually if they've been around for a while, especially, they're not usually invalid. They're not fallacious. Instead, there's two different ways an argument can be correct, and the first is valid. And so if the logic follows in the argument, if it goes and all the logic connects and there's no mistakes in the logic, then at a minimum the argument is valid. We say it's valid. X implies Y. X is true. Therefore, Y is true. That is a valid argument, right? But we don't actually know if X is true or not, right? If there's a zombie apocalypse, then you should buy a chainsaw. There is a zombie apocalypse. Therefore, you should buy a chainsaw. That's a valid argument. It is, however, not sound. And the reason why it is not sound is because there is not, in fact, a zombie apocalypse taking place right now. If there was, then we would say that is a sound argument. So there's two different ways an argument can be correct. The first is valid, where the logic follows, and it could be valid but not sound, right? Because there's not actually a zombie apocalypse right now, as far as I know. And the second option is the logic is correct and all of the premises are true. Okay? So if there was, in fact, a zombie apocalypse right now, that would be a valid and sound argument, or sound for short. Okay? So, what would be another good argument of this? Here, let's move to Discord. Let's see if we can get you guys to identify valid, invalid, and sound. Okay, those are the three options, right? Valid. Worst is invalid. The logic doesn't follow. Better than invalid is valid. Bad logic, but not premises. Valid. And if the logic follows and the premises are true, we call that sound. Okay. So let's try an example. If you borrow a book from the library, you should return it. Okay. I have borrowed a book from the library. Therefore, I should return. Is this invalid? Is it valid? Or is it sound? So premise 1, if you borrow a book from the library, you should return it. Premise 2, I have borrowed, me personally, Bill Kearney, have borrowed a book from the library. Conclusion, I should return the book. Is this invalid? Is it valid? Or is it sound? Got a lot of people saying sound. Interesting. It is in fact not sound because I do not actually have a book borrowed from the library. Nobody asked. Everybody just assumed that I have a book from the library. I do not actually, in fact, have a book from the library borrowed right now. Therefore, this is a valid argument. The logic follows. The form of the argument is a standard deductive argument. You know, x implies y, x therefore y. The form of the argument is valid. However, I do not actually have a book borrowed right now. Therefore, it is valid, but it is not sound. Okay, and so that doesn't mean it's a bad argument, right? The you know, like if I make an argument like if there's a zombie apocalypse, you should buy a chainsaw. You know, a lot of times these arguments are sort of good to have in your pocket. You know what I mean? Like, in case there is a zombie apocalypse, then you can bust out the argument and be like, oh yeah, you should run over to Ace Hardware and get a chainsaw, right? Because if the logic works, then the argument is true maybe, you know, some of the time, right? Okay, so let's do another one. And where's my... Something else. All right. If you clean your room, no, I don't know if each person's cleaned their room or not. If you buy a lottery ticket, you will win $1 million. You bought a lottery ticket. You bought a lottery ticket, so this would be premise 1. If you buy a lottery ticket, you will win $1 million. Premise 2, you bought a lottery ticket. Conclusion, you won $1 million. So it's invalid. Is it valid, or is it sound? If you buy a lottery ticket, it is guaranteed you will win $1 million. Premise 2, you bought a lottery ticket. Conclusion, therefore, you won $1 million. Okay, and so this, everybody is saying invalid. That's wrong. This is actually a valid but not sound argument. Again, this is the exact same argument I just gave you before. X implies Y. If you buy a lottery ticket, you will win $1 million. As it turns out, that premise is wrong, but that's the form of the argument. If X, then Y. And X, therefore, Y. It's the exact same argument as I gave you before. But before, all of you guys said sound. This time, all of you guys said invalid. And the reason why is because the human brain works that way. Okay? So this is a valid argument. The form of the argument, the logic is correct. However, the premise is not correct. Which one of these two premises is not correct? Premise 1 or premise 2? Or both? It's not invalid. This is a valid argument. It is just the premise is not correct. All right? Yeah. Okay, Kenji says premise 1. Kenji, did you buy a lottery ticket? Yeah, premise 1 isn't true. You don't say premise 1 isn't sound. Soundness applies to an argument. So this argument form here is your standard deductive argument, right? And the form of this argument is valid, right? This is, if you buy a lottery ticket, you will win $1 million. You bought a lottery ticket, therefore you'll win $1 million. that's a valid form of reasoning, but the premises are not true, right? So which of these premises are not true? P1, P2, or both, or neither? What do you think? Do you see how like your English brain can get in the way sometimes of a good argument? Right? Because you know this is not true, right? Like everyone immediately jumped on the fact that P1 is not true, right? And I don't know if P2 is true or not, right? Because that's actually it's something I don't know. I don't know if you have bought a lottery ticket, right, or not. I actually don't know. This is a premise because it's talking about you, like you, the student, not me. You. I don't know, and this could be true for some people, and it could be false for some people. I actually don't know. So the question, I'm just going to put a question mark there because I don't know. But P1 is definitely false, right? So it doesn't actually matter about P2. So this is a valid but not sound argument. Okay. Let's do another one. Premise 1. Murder makes someone a bad person. Maybe there's a better way of phrasing this. If you murder someone, that makes you bad. Someone. Okay. You did not murder someone. Conclusion. You are a good person. Okay. Invalid, valid, or sound. Invalid, valid, or sound. Does the logic follow? If the logic does not follow, it's invalid. If the logic follows, but one of the premises is false, it's valid, but not sound. And if the premises are true and the conclusion is true, or the logic's true and the premises are true, if the logic works, rather, and the premises are true, then it's sound. And I actually don't know if you've murdered somebody or not, so, yeah. This argument may be different, who knows? Murder makes someone a bad person. You have not murdered somebody. Therefore, you are a good person. You are not a bad person. Because, maybe there's an in-between state, bad and good and in-between. So I'll correct that a little bit. Murder makes somebody a bad person. You did not murder somebody. Therefore, you are not a bad person. If the steps are correct, if the logic works, if the logic works. So we've got two premises, right? We got premise 1, murder makes somebody a bad person. Premise 2, you do not murder somebody. If the conclusion follows from the premises, it is at a minimum valid. If the premises are also true, it makes it sound. Okay? It's impossible to be sound but not valid. Like if the premises are true but the logic doesn't work, it's just invalid, right? So the options are invalid, which means the logic doesn't work. Valid, which means the logic works. Valid but not sound. And then sound. So these are your three options. If steps are correct, it's valid. If nothing is correct, then it is invalid. If both premises are false, let's say, but the logic follows, then it's still valid. Okay. This argument is invalid. And Mary Leslie has the right reason for it. It is possible that you are a bad person for some other reason, right? Like maybe you like kicking puppies, or, you know, listening to Smash Mouth or something like that, right? So it's possible you're a bad person for another reason. And so this is actually a logical fallacy, right? This is X implies Y, not Y, therefore not X. That's the form of this argument. And so this is not a valid form of reasoning, right? Murder makes somebody a bad person. Sorry, I wrote that down backwards. Murder makes somebody a bad person. X implies Y. Murder makes you a bad person. Not X, therefore not Y. Not Y. So this is denying the antecedent. If you did not murder somebody, we actually don't know if you're a good person or a bad person. All we know is that if you murder somebody, you're bad, but we don't know if you're good or bad if you didn't murder somebody. You could be bad for another reason, right? So this is a classic logical fallacy. X implies Y, not X, not Y. This is not valid. It's invalid. Let's do some more. So far, the students on Discord are doing worse than guessing, so we will keep doing this until the accuracy goes up. This is low stakes testing right here. You're not losing any points on this, so make sure you get, like, every time I ask a question, less and less students are responding because now they just don't trust. They don't trust their own instincts. But go for it. Just please post. It's amusing to me. So, you know, it's your job as students to entertain me. No, I'm kidding. It's good. You need to put yourself out there, and then if you get it wrong, then you're not losing any points. You're not going to get enough. You know, just see if you get it right. You know, kicking puppies and listening to Smash Mouth. Yeah, you're an all-star, right? Okay, so premise one. Premise one. Circles have no straight lines. A triangle has 3 straight lines. Conclusion: a circle, circles are not triangles. What do you guys think? Invalid, valid, or sound? Put yourself out. See, a lot of people think that if the argument, like if you agree with the argument, like you should return your library book. You know, like if you agree with the argument that it makes it sound, it doesn't. And you know, as you can see, like the other is true as well. You know, if you don't want it to be true, you immediately think it's invalid. So you have to look at the logic. Circles have no straight lines. A triangle has 3 straight lines. Therefore, circles are not triangles. Or I could say a circle is not a triangle if I want to be more precise. So therefore, a circle is not a triangle. Okay, this one is sound. Good job, you guys. This is correct. It is impossible for a circle to be a triangle. And the premises are correct. A circle has no straight lines in it. Circle is by definition a curve, right? A triangle has 3 straight lines, no curves. Therefore, they're not the same thing. Okay. Sound and valid sound so different. Yeah, a sound argument is valid. Like, you can't have a sound argument, or you can't have sound but not valid, right? Even if the premises are true, if the logic doesn't follow, it's not sound. Okay. Now let's take the square of an integer x is x times x the cube of an integer is cube of an integer x is x times x times x. Premise 2. Premise 3, or conclusion rather. The cube of an integer will always be bigger than the square. Okay. Square of an integer x is x times x. The cube of an integer x is x times x times x. Therefore, the cube of an integer will always be greater than, let's say greater than or equal to, because there's 1 or 0, right? So the cube of an integer will always be greater than or equal to the square. So if you have an integer 4, the square is 16, and the cube is 64. Okay. If you have an integer 5, the square is 25, the cube is 125. Is this valid? Is it invalid? Or is it sound? The cube of an integer will always be greater than or equal to the square. So you pass in 0. Square of 0 is 0, the cube of 0 is 0, so it's equal to. If it sounds right, then valid. It is impossible to be sound but not valid. Even if the premises are true, that does not make something sound. The logic has to be correct as well. Getting a range of responses here on Discord. Okay, so first of all, is it true that the square of an integer is equal to, the integer times itself? What do you guys think? Is the premise true? Is that true? All right, so that's true. And it's also true that the cube of something is x times x times x. That's by definition, right? Does the conclusion follow from the premises? Integers are whole numbers only. 5.1 is not an integer. Okay, and so the logic actually does not follow. And the reason for this is because there are negative numbers. And so if you have negative 5, the square of negative 5 is 25, and the cube of negative 5 is negative 125. So the cube is not always going to be bigger than the square. Greater than or equal to the square. Okay. And this is something that if you've never programmed before, this is the kind of thing that programmers forget all the time. They'll write a function, like a mathematical function, but in programming terms. They'll write a function that will take an integer, and they just forget that negative numbers exist. They can take, they'll handle positive numbers, they'll handle 0, but they just forget that, half of all numbers are negative, right? And this has been a source of a lot of bugs over the years. Airplanes aren't supposed to fly backwards in the air, right? And so if you get a negative airspeed reading, clearly that's an error, and you need to reboot the system, right? It's a bad idea. It's a bad idea. The reason for that being, like, what if there's a giant gust of wind, and your airspeed goes negative? You don't want to reboot your system in midair, you'll crash, right? And so one of the hardest things in life, and in programming, but just in life, is to think of the things you didn't think about, right? Like, most people just, forget that negative numbers exist. And one of the best habits of mind that come out of computer science, even if you're not a computer science major, like even if you're like a business major, one of the best benefits of training your mind in computer science, because computer science really is just critical thinking. Computer science really is just problem solving, and computer science majors get really good at solving problems and looking at ways things can go wrong, is to start thinking about, okay, well, what happens if, for example, anytime there's a website that has a donation box on it, it's just a habit that I have, that I always try typing in a negative number. So, Wikipedia pops up a donation page. Please donate money to Wikipedia. And I'm like, all right, I'll donate negative $125. And I want to see if their donation page will handle it, right? And you'd be surprised how many times it will proceed to a page where it's trying to charge my credit card negative money. You'd be absolutely surprised. And this is like for websites like Wikipedia and, like one of the biggest websites in the world, if not the biggest after Google, And they'll sometimes do things like they'll have a JavaScript program sitting there, like if you try typing in anything that's not a number, it erases the character. But you can edit the JavaScript, because the JavaScript runs in your browser. And so one of the years I tried donating negative money, it just wouldn't let me type the negative dollar. And so I messed with the JavaScript running in my browser and succeeded in putting negative 125 into the field, hit submit, and they just assumed that if you give code for somebody to run, it'll run properly. They're not going to hack it. Mm-hmm. And so their code handled, it accepted negative $125 as a donation, and it tried giving my Visa card negative money, and it didn't work, of course. And I don't know if, like the Visa processing system won't just hand out money to people if you're wondering about that. So there was no risk of me defrauding them or something like that. But it's highly amusing to see how far that you can get in a lot of these systems. Like, donate to our political campaign. Sure, I'm going to donate negative $10 to you. And they just don't assume that people on the internet would mess with them. What if he gave you the money back? Then I'd return it to them. I don't actually want to defraud Wikipedia. It's just a thing. Like because I've been doing this for years. Like, I just want to see if their system will detect a negative number and return. Sorry, you have to donate a non-negative amount of money, to the system. A lot of times, what they'll do is they'll put a minimum donation amount, and that's because there's a processing fee on a donation. And so one of the ways you can actually hurt a place accepting donations is to donate like 1 cent to them, and then the credit card fee that they pay for running your credit card for 1 cent is greater than the donation, and so you actually cost them money. So I've never done that, because again, I don't really have any desire to defraud people or to destroy Wikipedia. I mean, even though Wikipedia is kind of ridiculous. In a lot of ways, Wikipedia is just a garbage website. In some areas, Wikipedia is really good. In some areas, it is just absolute hot garbage. And so I refuse to give money to Wikipedia. But at the same time, I don't really want to see them destroyed. They provide a valuable service, blah, 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 blah. But So a lot of donation pages will say the minimum donation amount is $2, and that less than sign they use, if the donation amount is less than $2, that'll handle the negative numbers properly. But you'd be surprised how few places do that, you know. So they should have paid you for outsmarting them. Nah. Like I said, I have no desire to actually take any money from somebody, and the Visa is not going to just hand out money, you know. Anyway, so all right, let's do some more. Discard. If you study hard and so if you study hard, you will get an A in this class. You study hard. Conclusion, you will get an A. What do you guys think? Invalid, valid, or sound? Invalid, valid, but not sound. But I just say valid for short. What do you think? What do you guys think? And this might change depending on you. Like if you don't study hard, then premise 2 may or may not be true. It's got to be contingent upon your particular circumstances. Mata says, because you can still fail like a test. So, the form of the argument is this. Right? It's your standard deductive argument. If x, then y. X. Therefore y. So this is a valid argument. However, premise 1 is not correct. I don't know about premise 2, but it doesn't matter. As it turns out, it doesn't matter if mouse go. It doesn't matter if premise 2 is correct because premise 1 is false. It's entirely possible that you study hard but don't turn in any homework and don't take the tests. In which case you were guaranteed not to get an A in this class. You know what I mean? And so a lot of professors say, all you have to do is study hard and you'll get an A. No, you got to do the work too. So, as it turns out, you can study hard and not get an A. So this is a false premise. Okay. You know, your teachers lie to you when they say all you have to do is study hard and you'll get an A. No, you got to do the work. You know, that's actually what teachers care about. We actually care a lot less if you study rather than if you actually put in the time and the effort and the blood, sweat, and tears, you know, to actually do the work for the class. You know, if we give you a 8-page essay to write, then you got to do the essay. Okay. Yeah, let's move on from there. Okay. So, if you want to attack an argument, then if somebody makes an argument for you, like, for example, the one I just gave you guys. Your teacher says at the first day of class, if you study hard in this class, you will get an A. You put up your hand and you're like, so does that mean that I don't have to do any work in this class? I don't have to turn any homework? Is that what it means? You know, if you want to be the smart ass, you know, the teacher's going to laser sight, you know, shoot. Yeah, we got a smart ass in this class, huh? Right, but the teacher made an argument. If you study hard in this class, then, you know, you'll get an A. I mean, it's more of an implication, but like, so you could say, so if I study hard, I'll get an A even if I don't do the homework, and so that would be an attack on a premise, right? And so if you can show that a premise is wrong, like in fact you can study but not get an A, then you have shown that at a minimum it's an unsound argument, right? It could be valid but not sound, and like in class, that would probably, get some negative attention from the teacher, because people actually don't like being shown that they're wrong. You know what I mean? Like every person's got an ego, and people don't like being made foolish or feel like they're stupid and things like that. And so if you point out that your teacher's argument is wrong, in most classes they will like sensei death laser you. In this class, if I make a mistake, please tell me. You got panda for me? Thank you. We're gonna eat panda for lunch. And you would think pandas are an endangered species, but what can I say? There's a popular restaurant chain that serves panda food, so that'd be an equivocation fallacy. So if I ever make a mistake in an argument, which will happen, the amount of mistakes I make is inversely proportional to the amount of coffee I have. Just point it out, and it's okay. How much of logic relies on semantics? It depends. Like, if you're making those mathematical arguments that we did earlier, then, there's very little ambiguity in terminology, right? And in math, terms like int, integer, an integer is a whole number that's positive, 0, or negative. These things have well-defined, crisp definitions. We all know what it means. And so there's no there's no well, what if you're talking about a girl named Integer? We don't. That's usually not really an issue, especially when you're more mathematical kinds of things. If somebody equivocates like I just did, then you're equivocating on the word panda. You're ordering panda food, but that doesn't mean that it's panda food. It's not food for pandas, and it's not food made out of pandas. It is food from a place called Panda Express. And so if I'm equivocating, you guys should call me out on it, right? Although it's funny sometimes, right? It's clearly making a joke. Anything other than those two routes are logical fallacies. Yeah, so the basic forms, are x implies y, x, therefore y, and then you have x implies y, not x. Right? Those are the two basic argumentation forms. Right? So you have affirming the antecedent, which proves that the consequent is true, and you can deny the consequent, which proves that the antecedent is false. Okay, so if you want to attack somebody's argument, if you show the form of the argument is wrong, if you show the logic doesn't follow, if they do one of the classical fallacies, especially, if they say x implies y, not x, therefore not y. If they do this, you just nope, that's invalid, and that's it. You're done. You've disproven their argument. Okay. Or if they make a informal fallacy, like I did, by equivocating on panda, or if I cherry pick, for example, what if I say all Republicans love guns, and I've got a friend named Tristan who loves guns. He's a Republican, therefore my argument's correct. Right? What would you guys think about that? I make the claim. I'm making the this is kind of the conclusion, right? It's conclusion: all Republicans love guns. Premise 1: Tristan loves guns. Tristan heart guns. He works at Bracco's gun store, in fact. Tristan loves guns. Tristan is Republican. Therefore, all Republicans love guns. Is this valid, invalid, or sound? I'll tell you right now that premise 1 is true. I actually don't know if he's a Republican or not, but given that he works at a gun store, seems, probable to me. But who knows? Let's say it's true. So the premise is true. Premise 1's true. Premise 2 is true. Can I conclude that all Republicans love guns from the fact that one Republican that I know loves guns? Right? So this, you are correct. This is obviously an invalid argument, and this is a false generalization, or cherry picking, if you'd like. But cherry picking is a type of false generalization where you select a example to stand for the rule, and it sometimes goes the other way, where people will say that's the exception to the rule, and some people will say no, it's the example that proves the rule, and they'll usually pick out one or two cases and say, see, all Black Lives Matter protests were violent, or all Republicans love guns, or all Trump supporters wanted the congressman to be executed. This is a very, very common fallacy that the media and politicians use. Right? Like AOC accused Ted Cruz of wanting her to be murdered, right? So Ted Cruz tweeted something like, "Yeah, I agree with AOC that we should investigate this GameStop stock thing when they stopped trading on it." And then AOC said, "Cool, Ted Cruz, thanks, but you tried to have me murdered 2 weeks ago." So very common in politics, right? Okay, so there's two ways you can attack an argument. One is you show that logic doesn't work, and the other is you show that a premise is false, right? So if you have premise 1, premise 2, and conclusion, you can either show that the form of the argument doesn't work, it's invalid, it's a false generalization, it's denying this or affirming that, whatever, or there's a weaker form of attack, which you just show the argument is valid but not sound, right? Tristan is not, in fact, Republican, he is a libertarian. Oh, well, shoot. So that's it. That's the only way you can attack an argument. So when somebody is trying to persuade you of something, you need to look at it from two different angles. The first is, are the premises correct? And the second is, does the conclusion logically follow from the premises? And you have to get into that habit. A lot of people, all they do, and we saw this on Discord, is like, somebody makes a claim here, they say something, it doesn't really matter. If you agree with the conclusion, well, clearly this is a sound argument. And if you disagree with the conclusion, clearly it's an invalid argument. And no, it doesn't work that way. But that's how people's brains work, right? We want something we believe in to be true, and so we oftentimes will just not pay any attention to the form of the argument and not pay any attention to the premises, right? It's possible that somebody makes a claim like, pizza is the best kind of food, and the logic just doesn't follow, at all, And so you have to, even if you agree with them, you should look at it and see if it is a valid and sound argument. And even if they make a conclusion you disagree with, that doesn't mean it's invalid either, But it's a very human thing to do. Humans don't like being wrong, And so we'll just assume it's invalid. That's a fallacy. That's one of the most common things ever, right? Like somebody concludes something, therefore, and they say something you don't agree with, people will just immediately respond, that's a fallacy. Well, what fallacy? You can't just say something's fallacious, right? You know what I mean? You can't just say, oh, that's invalid, that's fallacious. You have to say why, right? You have to say that's this fallacy, that's that fallacy, this is the spot where you made the mistake. You guys understand? Like a lot of people just say, well, that's a fallacy. Well, what fallacy? Where? Which line? I wrote this whole thing. What line is fallacious? Where did I make my mistake? You can't just say that's fallacious. It makes it sound like they're being intellectual and disagreeing and attacking your argument. No, that's no counter argument whatsoever. If all they say is that's fallacious, that is not a counter argument. You have to point out there's either a false premise, which makes it unsound, or there is a mistake in the logic, which makes it invalid. They have to actually find the spot. And here's the kicker. Here's the kicker that people hate. If you cannot find a mistake in the reasoning, you're basically obligated to accept the conclusion, right? And this is something that people deep down really hate because people don't like changing their views. You know what I mean? Like people really don't like changing their views on things. And so like, like Bill Cosby, I grew up in the 80s, and Bill Cosby was America's dad, right? Theo Huxtable, or Dr. Huxtable, was this great, role model, funny, moral, just this great role model for everybody in America. And then all of this evidence started coming out that he was like drugging and raping women, right? And so my instinctive reaction was to be like, nah, it can't be true. Like, he played a doctor on TV. He can't be a bad person in real life, And that reasoning I made makes no sense whatsoever, right? People, they're actors. The whole point is acting is to be somebody you're not. You know what I mean? But internally, like, I just really didn't want Dr. Huxtable to be a bad guy. You know what I mean? Even though it's Bill Cosby and so people just don't want their beliefs to change. And then eventually enough evidence came out that I went, yeah, okay, yeah, he's a bad guy. Okay. So we are going to have lots of experience in this class, making arguments, looking at arguments. Like I said, I'll put up a quiz today, and I'll have different examples that are valid, invalid, and sound. And you have to look at them, analyze them, attack them, And when you attack your fellow classmates, which we'll start doing, by attack I mean see if there's a flaw in the reasoning. Always do so in a positive and constructive manner, right? And you guys have been fantastic at this. Your comments on Discord have had just the right tenor of being able to disagree, but disagree in a positive manner. And so you've activated my trap card. Is the quiz going to be due today? No. I never make things due the same day. We don't even have Mondays off, and so the quiz will be due on Wednesday probably. And so you can have plenty of time to review valid, invalid, and sound, or invalid, valid, and sound if you want to put it in order. And I'll just put up some arguments, and you can look at them and think about them, and see if you can find an attack. See if you can attack them, right? Kind of over time, but you need more practice? Cool. Let's go through this. Socrates is a man. All men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal. Valid, invalid, or sound? Are we having class next Monday? I don't think so. It's a holiday. Okay. And one of the most annoying things is Fresno State, Clovis Community College, and Clovis Unified School District all have different schedules and different days off this week. And so my daughter has a different set of days off than you guys, and you guys have a different set off than my Clovis College classes. It's like, kind of wish they'd all just, I wish everybody in the Fresno area would just kind of get together and be like, we're going to get Friday off. Let's just all agree on this. Valid, 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 sound. I think it's valid. So I would argue this is a sound argument. Now, you might be like, well, Socrates is dead, so he's not a man. And so you can make some sort of like semantic kind of argument, like, yeah, he's dust at this point, But I think, again, is a man, that means human, right? And you could say was human, and it doesn't really matter. It doesn't change the argument. And so some people will attack it kind of by equivocating, because the argument is using this in the sense that, Socrates is human, all humans are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal. And some people might attack this by saying, well, we don't know that all men are mortal, right? Like, I'm not dead. There's no proof that I'm mortal, In general, I would probably say this is sound. I'd probably say that's sound. Do we know for sure he's a man? He could be an alien, right? And so in cases like that, I would say don't be that person. You know what I mean? Like, do we know Socrates really existed? Maybe not, right? Because Socrates never wrote anything, right? Plato wrote things, his disciple wrote things, and Aristotle, Plato's disciple, wrote things. Socrates never wrote anything. right? But we also have like Xenophon's trial of Socrates, and so there's multiple people that wrote about Socrates who's probably, you know, there's probably a small minority of people that think that Socrates was just an invention by Plato, right? And it's actually just Plato. It was Plato all along. I feel that my doubts in this class has just reached another level. Yeah, but dial it down a little bit there, you know, because like, you know, you could be like, how do we know anything's real, you know? How do you know that mammals have fur? We could all be brains in a vat. And for this class, I would dial it down a little bit from there. You know what I mean? Like, kind of roll with it a little bit. When we say Socrates is a man, we don't, you know what I mean? Like, you know, just kind of work with it a little bit. Because if you really want to be tedious, you could say all birds can fly. Bats are birds, therefore bats can fly. So you'd be like, well, not all birds can fly, you know? And maybe yeah. Actually, I probably agree with that, you know, because there's ostriches, right? Yeah. So in that case, yeah, I would actually agree with the person. Not all birds can fly, right? An ostrich can fly once, right? If it falls off a cliff. Okay, so premise 1 is false. Premise 2 is false. So at a minimum, it's not sound, right? Does the logic follow? All birds can fly. Bats are birds. Therefore, bats can fly. Does the logic work? Penguins. You've never seen a flying penguin? BBC for April Fool's Day a while back did a fake documentary on flying penguins. It's pretty amazing. Bats are not birds. No, they're not. Bats are mammals. They're not birds. Yeah, this is a valid but not sound argument, right? So this is valid. It's actually the same argument as this one. Socrates is a man. All men are mortal. There's a group, you know, so a group called men, you know, humanity. Socrates is a member of men. Therefore, any attributes that apply to all men apply to Socrates. Here, we say we have a group of all birds. Bats are birds, which is a false premise, but doesn't matter. Therefore, all properties that apply to birds apply to bats. The logic is the same, but the premises are not true. Okay. In fact, both of these premises are wrong. But you only need one. Only one of them being wrong makes it unsound. You don't need both of them to be wrong. It's doubly unsound. Yeah, and that's set theory. Very good, Garcia. All cats are mammals. All dogs are mammals. Therefore, all cats are dogs. So, what do you guys think? Invalid, valid, or sound? All cats are mammals. All dogs are mammals. Therefore, all cats are dogs. And remember, the human instinct here, the human instinct is to look at the conclusion and be like, well, that's wrong, right? That's wrong. Therefore, it's invalid. I've been teaching Seaside 1 for a while, and that's the reasoning most people will make, right? But it's not invalid unless you can show where the error in the logic is. Okay. All cats are mammals. All dogs are mammals. Therefore, all cats are dogs. Does the logic work? That's the question. The premises are true, right? So if the premises are true, it can't be valid, right? So everybody's saying valid right now. It can't be right. You cannot be right, because the one thing that it can't be is valid but not sound, because both these premises are true. I'll give you that, right? So this premise is true. That premise is true. If the premises are true, the answer cannot be valid but not sound, because the premises are true, right? So you got two options. It's going to be invalid or it's going to be sound. Okay. So if the premises are true, it cannot be valid but not sound. Okay. So we knew the conclusion's false, but you still can't say invalid. You have to have a reason why. Why is it invalid? If it's invalid, that means the form of the argument, the reasoning, the logic doesn't work. Where is the mistake? Right? If each premise was swapped, it would be invalid. All cats are mammals, or dogs are mammals. It doesn't matter what order you put them in for this. Watch it be sound. Well, let's put it this way. Let me draw a picture for you. Right here is the set of all mammals. Inside of the set we've got cats. And inside of the set we've got dogs. Does that mean that these two sets are the same? No, because they're just both members of mammals. You know, all men are humans, all women are humans, therefore all men are women. No, like they're distinct subsets within a set. So this argument here, all cats are dogs, doesn't work because they're both subsets of mammals, but that doesn't mean they're the same subset. You know, all even numbers are integers, all odd numbers are integers, therefore all even numbers are odd numbers. No, it does not work. This is invalid reasoning. Okay, and so there's a instinctive reaction from students to be like, the conclusion's wrong, therefore it's invalid. Nope, doesn't work that way, because there's always a possibility the reasoning was correct, but the premise is wrong. You know, and so you have to sit there and you have to look at it, and you have to turn the gears in your head, have smoke coming out of your ears. You know. Okay, if Socrates was a philosopher, then he wasn't a historian. So if he was a philosopher, then he was not a historian. We know that Socrates was not a historian. Therefore, Socrates was a philosopher. Is this valid, invalid, or sound? Valid, invalid, or sound? If you guys need to leave, that's fine. You can watch the rest of this later. We're not going to have class on Monday, so I'm actually going to go a little bit over time this time so that you guys have enough experience to do the quiz. Okay. See you. I don't have class after this, so I'm going to go on. See you. This is invalid. This is invalid reasoning. This is called affirming the consequent. Okay? This is a classic logical fallacy. It's called affirming the consequent. And again, a lot of people just look at the conclusion. Socrates was a philosopher. And they go, it's sound. You know, the conclusion was right. It's sound. Nope. 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 Not at all. You know, remember this. X implies Y, not Y, therefore X. This is affirming the consequent. That's the consequent. That's the antecedent. X implies not Y, yeah. And so this is affirming the consequent. It's a classical logical fallacy. If Socrates was a philosopher, then he wasn't a historian. Socrates wasn't a historian. That doesn't mean he necessarily was a philosopher. He could have been a stonemason, which he was, right? He could have been a politician. He could have been an educator, which he was, right? Just because we know he wasn't a historian doesn't mean he couldn't have been something else. The logic does not follow from this. This is invalid reasoning. Okay. All engineers enjoy ballet. Some males are engineer. Therefore, some males enjoy ballet. What do you guys think? All engineers enjoy ballet. Some males are engineers. Therefore, some males enjoy ballet. Is the conclusion true? It probably actually is, right? So some males enjoy. There's probably some males out there that enjoy watching ballet or doing ballet. I didn't really explain which one it is. And so Mitchell Bibbs says invalid. Not all engineers enjoy ballet. That doesn't make it invalid. That if you are arguing that the premise here is false, and some males are engineer, that's true, right? If you're arguing that the premise is false, that makes it valid, but not sound. Remember, valid means the logic works. Sound means it's valid, and the premises are true. Okay. So in this case, the logic is actually correct. If you have a set, let's say all mammals, and you say some all mammals have hair, some mammals are cats, therefore cats have hair, let's see, all mammals have fur, some animals are mammals, so this is all animals, or quadrupeds, let's say. All mammals have fur, some quadrupeds are mammals, therefore some quadrupeds have fur. That's a valid and sound argument to make. In this case, the premise is false. This is a false premise, but the logic is actually correct. So this is valid but not sound. Okay. If you have a false premise, it cannot be sound. So you have to just see if the reasoning is correct. Okay. Just because the premise is false does not mean the reasoning is wrong. Okay, so yeah, that's good enough for now. All right, so that is argumentation, and you're going to be writing arguments throughout the semester. You're going to be reading arguments throughout the semester, and as you can see from the answers on Discord, it's tricky. It's tricky. You can't just like make a snap judgment on it. You have to go through each one of the premises, and if any of the premises are false, all birds can fly. False. There's ostriches. You know, if a premise is false, you also have to write that down a lot of times. That premise is false because there's emus and ostriches and cassowaries and penguins that can't fly, right? That's a false premise. And so if any of the premises are false, then it's either going to be invalid or valid, but not sound. Okay, those are your two options. If all the premises are true, you carefully go through it. Some men are engineers, that's correct. Some women are engineers, that's also correct. All right, well, cool. Both of those are true premises, then your options are going to be invalid or sound, right? So if you say some women are engineers, some men are engineers, therefore men are women, the logic does not follow. That makes it invalid, right? Or the premises are true and the logic works, that makes it sound. And so you have to be very careful. When you look at an argument, you have to get into that habit of looking at if each of the premises are true or false. If they're all true, all right, cool. Now let's see if the conclusion follows logically from the premises. If it does, cool, it's sound. Okay. If the logic doesn't follow, it's invalid. Doesn't matter if the premises are true or not. And if the logic follows, but one of the premises is false, then it's valid but not sound. Those are the three options. Okay. So I'll put up a quiz so you guys can get more practice doing this. And like I said, this kind of stuff, fallacies are on the midterm. Logic, argumentation, that's like the bread and butter for this class. Okay. So later on when we're arguing if social media is good or bad, or if AI is going to take over the world, you have to understand these basics of logic. And that's why we went hard onto implications the first real week of school. It's because X implies Y is like really important for like everything, you know, computer science, real life, critical thinking, argumentation, doesn't matter. Understanding logical implications. If X, then Y is really, really important. Okay, hope we discuss this again next lecture. Sure, I can come up with fun examples as much as you'd like. Okay, so I will see you guys next Wednesday. Make sure you get your Scratch thing done. When you finish it, you're going to share it to the studio, and maybe I'll play some of them on Wednesday too. We'll see. Okay. So I know I went over, but we're not going to have class on Monday, so I wanted to put in a little bit extra time, and so people at home can get a little bit more experience with fallacies and argumentation and stuff like that. Okay, so fun class today, guys. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for putting your answers out there and taking a risk and willing to be wrong and things like that, because to the modern mind, being wrong is one of the most scary things there is, and so just always keep on doing that. Take a risk. Take a risk being wrong, and it helps you learn. Trust me, it helps you learn. Okay, see you guys on Wednesday.